I spent the better part of a decade living out of a sleeper cab. It's a strange existence, watching the country blur past your window at 70 miles per hour. You get used to the solitude, you even start to crave it. My rig was my own little self-contained world, a rolling apartment where I knew every creak and groan. The low hum of the diesel engine was the soundtrack to my life. It was a lonely job, but it was a predictable one. I thought I had seen it all. This happened on a Tuesday night in the dead of winter, somewhere on that long, black stretch of I-80 that connects Nevada to Utah. The kind of empty where the radio just plays static and you start to feel like you're the only person left on Earth. My eyes were burning, my logbook was pushing its limits, but I was chasing a deadline. Just another 100 miles, I told myself. That's when the world lurched. There was a violent, metallic pang from under the cab, so loud it felt like a gunshot. The whole rig shuddered, and the steering wheel tore itself from my grip. I fought to keep the trailer from jackknifing as I felt the unmistakable, sickening sag of a blown steer tire. I wrestled the truck to the shoulder, the deflated rubber screaming against the asphalt. I sat there for a minute, my heart hammering, the sudden silence of the dead engine deafening. The night outside was absolute. My radio was useless out here. No signal. I had no choice. I limped the rig forward at 5 miles an hour, the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of the ruined tire like a drumbeat of my own failure. Miles later, a single, flickering sign materialized out of the darkness, promising fuel and nothing else. It wasn't a choice, it was my only option. The lot was mostly empty, just a couple of other rigs powered down for the night, their shapes like sleeping elephants in the dark. Changing a 100-pound truck tire in the freezing wind is a special kind of hell. I wrestled with the air wrench, my knuckles raw and bleeding, the smell of burnt rubber thick in my nostrils. It was under the harsh glare of my headlamp that I first saw him. I didn't hear him approach. One moment I was alone, the next, a man was just standing there, just beyond the edge of my light. He was thin and wore dark, threadbare clothes that seemed to swallow the light. His face was all sharp angles and shadows, and his eyes didn't seem to blink. "That's a bad bit of luck," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "Tell me about it," I grunted, not looking up from the lug nuts. He took a step closer. "It's cold out here. Bet it's warm in there, though." He nodded toward my cab. "It's all right," I said, trying to project a finality that wasn't there. "Do you sleep sound?" he asked. The question was so out of place, so oddly intimate, that I finally stopped and looked right at him. His eyes were fixed on the curtain to my sleeper cab. "I sleep fine," I lied. He gave a slow, unsettling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good. A man needs his rest." And then, as silently as he appeared, he turned and melted back into the shadows between the other trucks. I finished the tire change, my hands shaking now from more than just the cold. I did my routine walk around, but this time it was different. I wasn't just checking my rig, I was scanning the darkness, my head on a swivel. I checked the cab doors not once, but 3 times, pulling on the handles to make sure they were locked. Everything was secure. I climbed inside and drew the thick curtain to the sleeper bunk. Sleep felt impossible now. My mind was racing, replaying the bizarre conversation. Do you sleep sound? Who asks that? But exhaustion is a powerful drug. Against my better judgment, I collapsed onto the bunk, telling myself he was just some lonely drifter. My dreams were a frantic, claustrophobic mess of being trapped in a small, dark space with the feeling of something breathing just on the other side of a thin wall. I was woken once by a soft scraping sound from the cab, but I dismissed it as my tired mind playing tricks, the truck's metal contracting in the cold. I forced myself back to sleep. The next thing I knew, there was a sharp, insistent tapping on my passenger side window. My heart lurched. I was groggy, disoriented. I pulled back the curtain and saw the unmistakable shape of a state trooper, his face lit from below by his flashlight. His expression was a blank mask. My mind raced through a checklist of possible violations. He just gestured for me to roll down the window. The blast of freezing air woke me up completely. "Sir," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. A bloodless, monotone delivery. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Open your door, step out of the vehicle, and walk directly to the back of your trailer. Do not rush. And no matter what you hear, do not look back at your cab. Do you understand?" It wasn't a question from a concerned officer. It was a command from a machine. The controlled, almost robotic urgency in his voice bypassed any part of my brain that wanted to argue. I just nodded. I opened my door, and my boots hit the freezing asphalt. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to see what was so important that I couldn't look at it. I forced my eyes forward, focusing on the reflective tape of my own mud flaps as I walked. It was the longest 50 feet of my life. When I reached the back, another officer was waiting, just as silent and stoic as the first. He guided me behind his cruiser, and from there, I finally looked. The door to my truck was wide open. They were pulling a man out. He was scrawny, dressed in rags, and in his hand was a long, thin butcher knife that gleamed in the flashing blue and red lights. It was the man from the parking lot. The first trooper walked over, his face still an unreadable slate. He wasn't using a thermal imager. He said, "The attendant at the fuel desk called us. Said he saw that man get off the bus here an hour before you pulled in. Said he was carrying a tool, a spike strip. He watched him walk out onto the highway, and then he watched him follow you back in." He paused, his eyes locking onto mine. "He must have slipped in while you were wrestling with that tire. He was sitting on the floor of your cab, right behind your seat, the whole time you were sleeping." I drove for another 2 years after that, but I never really slept on the road again. The whole thing had been a trap. He hadn't just found an opportunity, he had created it. Driving a big rig through West Texas at 3 in the morning is like navigating an ocean of black ink. The world outside your headlight ceases to exist. The loneliness out there is a physical presence, so profound it feels like it's sitting in the passenger seat next to you. To keep from going crazy, what we truckers calls white line fever, you depend on the CB radio. Channel 19 is the lifeline, a constant, crackling stream of consciousness from other lonely souls out there. It's a mix of weather reports, speed trap warnings, and tired jokes, a fragile, static-laced community that keeps the madness at bay. One night, somewhere west of nowhere, the normal chatter just stopped. It didn't fade out, it was cut off, as if someone had flipped a switch. The airwaves went dead silent. And then, a new voice faded in, clear and crisp, with no static at all. It was a man's voice, completely calm and monotone, like a machine reading a script. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was narrating. Passing the sign for exit 214, the voice said, "There's a green Peterbilt in the right lane. Driver is a man with a red hat." My blood turned to ice. My heart, which had been lulled by the drone of the engine, slammed against my ribs. I was driving a green Peterbilt. I was wearing my favorite faded red hat, the one I always wore on long hauls. I snatched the MIC off its hook, my hand trembling. "Who is this? What rig are you in?" "I don't see you," I yelled, my own voice sounding thin and reedy in the quiet cab. The voice continued as if I hadn't spoken, its tone never changing. "The driver appears agitated. He is looking in his mirrors now, desperately scanning the vast, empty desert highway. Nothing. No headlights behind me. He just passed mile marker 218. The voice continued, its calmness a terrifying contrast to my own panic. "There's a rest stop in 5 miles. A very quiet one. He looks tired. He looks like he needs to rest." My mind was screaming. Was someone in my trailer? Had someone hidden in the sleeper cab? Was a car pacing me in the dark with its lights off? It was impossible. I had to know. I had to do something to break the script, to prove this wasn't real. I did the only thing I could think of. I reached over and flicked on my main interior cab light, flooding the space with bright, sterile light and ruining my night vision. The voice on the radio immediately responded, without a single beat of hesitation. "The driver has just turned on his light. He thinks he can see me. He can't see me." That's when true animal terror took over. This wasn't a prank. This was something else. I stomped on the accelerator, my engine roaring in the empty night, and I blew past that rest stop at 90 miles an hour, the sign for it just a ghostly white blur. For the next hour, the voice would cut in periodically, a calm, clinical play-by-play of my own frantic escape. Passing exit 225. Speed is increasing. The driver is now in Culberson County. Finally, like a mirage, I saw the distant, hazy glow of El Paso. As I approached the city limits, the halo of civilization, the voice came on one last time. The target is nearing the safe zone. Session concluded. And just like that, the normal, chaotic chatter of other truckers faded back in, loud and obnoxious. It was as if nothing had ever happened. I pulled into the first major truck stop, my nerves so frayed I felt like I was vibrating. I stumbled into the 24-hour diner, ordered a coffee I knew I couldn't drink, and just sat there in a booth, trying to make sense of the impossible. In the booth behind me, I overheard two old-timer truckers talking, their voices low and gravelly. "Hear anything from the Observer tonight?" one of them asked. The other one grunted, "Not me. But Jimmy said he was on the air about an hour back. Some poor sucker in a green pit. Said the guy was really moving, too. Must have spooked him good." My head snapped up. The coffee cup rattled in my hand. I leaned over the back of the booth, my voice hoarse. "The Observer? Who is that?" The first driver looked me up and down, his eyes knowing. "You must be new out here," he said. "He's a ghost on the airwaves. Every few months, he picks a target. Gives a play-by-play. The legend says he's guiding a spotter car, one that runs dark, no headlights. Sets him up for a hijacking." He took a long sip of his coffee, then looked me dead in the eye. "Heard the last guy," he narrated, "the one in the blue Kenworth. They found his rig a week later, just outside of town here. Stripped clean. Never found the driver." I didn't say another word. I walked back to my rig, my legs unsteady. The voice hadn't been haunting me. It had been hunting me. The session didn't conclude because I was safe. It concluded because I had escaped the designated kill zone. And then the final, horrifying piece clicked into place. The voice wasn't guiding a car. A car running without headlights in that darkness would be impossible. The voice was so clear with no static because the signal was close. It had to be. I thought back to the rest stop, the one I had sped past. The one the voice had told me was very quiet. I remembered the single, dark shape of another rig, parked way in the back, silent and powered down. He wasn't in a car behind me. He was in a truck right in front of me, watching me in his mirrors the entire time. I had been following him. He was the bait, and I was driving myself straight into his trap. I reached up, grabbed my CB radio, and tore the wires right out of the console. I drove the rest of the way to California in absolute, terrified silence. We were on day 3 of a cross-country move, and the minivan felt less like a vehicle and more like a pressurized cabin of simmering resentment. My wife and I were running on fumes and the kind of gas station coffee that tastes like disappointment. Our 2 kids in the back had exhausted their supply of games and were now engaged in a low-grade, whining war of attrition. The whole of our life, every piece of furniture, every photo album, every childhood toy was rattling around in the U-Haul trailer we dragged behind us, a constant, heavy reminder of the stress we were all under. Around 10 p.m., somewhere in the deep, dark woods of rural Pennsylvania, a sign for a rest stop emerged from the gloom. It was one of the big, modern ones, aggressively bright and almost surgically clean, an island of sterile light in an ocean of blackness. As we pulled into the long, curving ramp, my headlights swept across the main building. That's when I first saw him. He was leaning against the brick wall, just outside the sliding glass doors, a man whose stillness was so absolute it was jarring. He was just watching the cars arrive, his face a pale, emotionless mask. I remember a flicker of unease, but in the chaos of parking and unbuckling kids, the thought was quickly buried. We all piled out, the cold night air a shock to the system. We used the restrooms, fed crumpled dollars into vending machines for stale chips, and spent 10 minutes stretching our legs under the harsh, humming fluorescent lights. The man was still there when we returned to the car, in the exact same spot, his eyes seeming to follow our minivan as we pulled away and merged back into the river of darkness. The stop had done nothing to improve the mood. About an hour later, a fragile, exhausted peace had finally settled in the van. It was broken by my 7-year-old daughter, Lily, her voice small but clear in the quiet. "Look what I got," she said with a hint of secret pride. My wife, who had been half asleep in the passenger seat, turned around. "What is that, sweetie?" I thought we agreed, no more souvenirs until we get to the new house. Lily held up a small, crudely carved wooden bird. It was unpainted, the knife mark still visible, but the shape was strangely intricate, its wings half spread as if in mid-flight. "It's not a souvenir," she said, tracing the bird's wooden wings with her finger. "It was a gift." A cold feeling, heavy and immediate, settled deep in my stomach. It wasn't an RO feeling, it was a primal alarm bell. I looked at my wife in the review mirror. Her face had gone pale, her eyes wide. "A gift from who, honey?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm, the way you speak when you don't want to startle a wild animal. "The quiet man," Lily said, her gaze still fixed on the bird. "From the bathroom place. He was in the hall. He told me not to tell anyone. He said it was our secret." She paused, then looked up at us, her eyes wide and innocent. "He said it would help him remember me." I yanked the steering wheel and pulled the van over onto the shoulder so violently that the U-Haul fishtailed behind us, the tires screaming on the asphalt. The kid started crying, startled by the sudden violence. My wife was trying to get more information out of a now frightened Lily, asking what he looked like, what else he said, but I was already out of the van, the keys shaking in my hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. I ran to the back of the U-Haul. The heavy-duty padlock was still there, secure, untouched. I fumbled with the key, my relief so immense it made me dizzy. It was just a creepy guy, I thought. A weirdo in a rest stop. I rolled up the heavy door. The beam of my phone's flashlight cut through the darkness inside. Our life was a chaotic jumble of boxes and furniture, exactly as we had packed it. Nothing seemed out of place. I was about to close the door, to write this all off as the world's most terrifyingly timed coincidence when my flashlight beam caught something in a small gap behind our old, floral-patterned couch. A dirty, balled-up sleeping bag and an empty plastic water bottle. And then I saw it, and the world tilted on its axis. The small metal latch on the inside of the trailer door, the kind you can use to lock yourself in. It was in the closed position. My blood ran cold. The man hadn't just approached my daughter. He had been living in there. He had waited until we were all distracted, slipped out to use the restroom, and then slipped back in. He hadn't been watching us from the wall. He had been waiting for his ride to come back. We hadn't just been moving our family. For God knows how many miles, through how many states, we had been smuggling a monster.